be passionate about the problem, not the solution.
Building a culture that takes pride in continuous improvement, pride in making a difference, in being entrepreneurial and agile, and using that to change the systems, to change the ways people think, and to teach people how to think differently.
Learning fast and failing fast. And as a technologist, I don't really think you understand the boundaries of what the space you're working in if you haven't failed.
People have been trained to be a certain thing, but in the future, we envision these roles to be more diffused.
Building both the knowledge muscle and the experience muscle go kind of hand in hand and become quite important.
This is what keeps my learning alive, is every day I have to give an answer. So that keeps me driven as to what's the exciting thing I learned that day.
I try to make as many interactions as I have throughout the day a learning lesson.
In terms of setting the boundaries, in terms of what we want to do and what we need to say no, because I think that a lot of the challenges and the stress that comes in the workplace is having that ability to see what's important and say yes or no to it. Meditation has been a game changer.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Centered CxO series webinar. It is a panel discussion that we have for you today on Agile learning for growth and impact. We have three really esteemed panelists with us today. You'll meet them in a moment, but first I'll say a quick hello. I'm Jennifer. I'll be the moderator. I have the honor of being the moderator for our conversation today. I sit on the board for the TLEX Institute. I also oversee training nationally. And so I'm just really honored and thrilled to be here with you all. I do have a few slides that we'll go through briefly to start us off on our conversation. I hope you can all see my screen here. A little bit about TLEX, who is hosting today's conversation. We are a global training company. We've been in operation for more than 2 decades. We've worked in 30 countries with more than 500 clients, and as you can see here, we've impacted more than 200,000 employees, and you can see a sample of some of the clients that we've had the honor of working with. Our clients, from Fortune 100 companies to startups to nonprofits to even government, bring TLEX in to better enable innovation, resilience, leadership, better team trust, collaboration, and connection, and learning agility. So let's set some context for our conversation today. Learning agility could be understood in many, many different ways. One very common definition is that it is the ability to learn, of course, unlearn, relearn, and really take learnings from experiences, pivot, and apply them to new experiences. And you'll see that our panelists today have literally been doing this throughout their career. Now, when it comes to the topic of learning agility, or really the forces that are necessitating why learning agility is such a critical skill for us today, there are many, many examples. I'd like to just call out 4 in particular, and then in a moment, we'll actually hear from our panelists a more nuanced perspective of some of those dynamics at play that are requiring greater learning agility. So one example is just technology acceleration. We know about this. We see this every day. AI capabilities, for example, double every 7 months. Multi-wave technologies, organizations are needing to manage AI, cloud, hybrid, for example, simultaneously. Now, of course, this is impacting our business models. Industry boundaries are getting blurred. We see this in Amazon, for example, a very classic example. They started in retail. Now they're offering AI solutions. And of course, there's routine reinvention at play. We see this with softwares that started as licensing platforms that are now in subscription. And of course, behind all of this, we have people, right? So the workforce is also transforming. According to one study by TAFE, 48% of companies would rather hire and train new talent than train veteran employees. And we've got 4 generations at the workforce right now. As of this year, 25% of the workforce is made up of Gen Z. So that's 4 generations, 4 styles of learnings. And skills have a half-life. So average skills for us, about 5 years, meaning half of what we know becomes obsolete in 5 years. If you're in the tech industry, that lowers to 2 to 3 years. And all of this is against the backdrop of geopolitical volatility. We see this with the supply chains, with regulation, and of course, uncharted territory with regards to trade policy. So these are just a few examples. And our panelists today, they don't just understand this theoretically, they're literally living this day to day, moment to moment. And so before we jump into our questions, I'll take a few quick moments to introduce each of them. First up, in alphabetical order, we're really thrilled to have Mike Williams with us, a fellow and vice president, both at Kyndryl and at IBM. He is the chief architect of Kyndryl Bridge. Kyndryl Bridge is a massive IT solutions platform that's providing solutions end-to-end for a number of enterprises. It literally has learning loops, I should say, built in to its system. And not only that, he's really played this role as a technologist over decades, and he's developed core technologies, but he doesn't stop there. He actually then applies and implements these core technologies to solve problems. Also a fellow at IBM, he oversaw and played a pivotal role with Kyndryl coming out of IBM and managing that process end to day, both from platforms, systems, team, and culture. So a lot of learnings that he's acquired over the course of his career in a constant learning rhythm that he's employed. So we're really thrilled to have you with us today, Mike. Thank you so much for being with us today. Next,
Yeah, happy to be here.
thank you, Mike. And then next up, we have Patricia Hargill. Patricia is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Messer. Messer is a global gas company. They provide industrial, medical, specialty gases all over the world, all industries. She oversees, or rather sits at the helm of sustainability efforts at Messer and oversees operations to that end across the Americas, Asia, and Europe. An engineer by training from MIT, Patricia has led multinational teams across transportation, mining, and consulting. But one really consistent theme throughout her career has been a change management leader. I would dare say a change management architect. She has literally taken complex change and translated that into organizational goals, managing technology, culture, and the commercial aspects. So she brings an incredible amount of experience to our conversation today. Patricia, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
Thank you, Patricia. And of course, last but not least, and by the way, this is in alphabetical order, we have Ranveer Chandra. Ranveer has quite an interesting background. I think I'm going to go in reverse, Ranveer, for your introduction. Ranveer is a scientist at heart. He has published more than 100 papers. He holds more than 150 patents. And what we can see in his trajectory is literally taking learnings from the lab and translating that into impact. And he creates impact principally as the VP of Microsoft's Copilot tuning. They're literally personalizing and democratizing access to AI across so many different enterprises and companies. Prior to that, if we wanted a really cool example of business models changing, as the CTO of Agri-Food, they literally brought, through Microsoft, who we know as a tech company, brought AI technologies into agriculture. So a lot of pivoting and multiple applications of learnings over the course of his career. Ranveer also lends an incredible perspective and experience to our conversation today. Ranveer, thank you so much for being here with us. We're so honored to have you.
Great to be here, Jennifer.
Thank you. And so with that, we'll jump into our conversations. Give me a moment here to stop sharing my screen. You're all there. I'm here. Let's get started. So as I mentioned, I did speak very briefly about some of the examples and forces at play, if you will, that are really making learning agility, this muscle, this skill of learning agility, non-negotiable for us. But I would love to dig in a little deeper and hear from each one of you, from your respective industries, from your respective perspectives. What are some of those macro or even micro forces at play that are necessitating and making learning agility non-negotiable? Ranveer, we're going to start with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. At right now, the world's changing so fast, and you presented some of the key points there around, the technology changing, the geopolitical landscape changing, the business models changing, and that is critical. I'll just give you some examples in my perspective from where I sit, how things are changing. Of course, at Microsoft, our entire business model changed, and a lot of the changes happened since Satya came over. He was a CEO who's been driving this change across Microsoft. Around one of the key things he's talked about is this growth mindset. One of the three key principles at Microsoft is that of a growth mindset, where the key thing we talk about is instead of saying know it all, we are the learn it all. We're never going to be like, hey, I know what we're talking about. It's all about learning and showing that growth. In my own case, it happened multiple times. My background is a computer scientist. I did my PhD at Cornell, joined Microsoft. I did a lot of work on networking and systems. I designed how two computers talk to each other. I understood that really well. But after joining Microsoft, one of the key things that we had to do was go lower in the stack, design chips. So I designed the Xbox One wireless controller protocols. If you're using the Xbox One, that's something where we had to go deeper and learn about waves and just go deeper in the physics layer. But then one of the things that really I got, something that I wanted to do all the time was this thing around agriculture and food. My training is not in agriculture. I'm a computer scientist by training. The only thing that I know about agriculture and food is when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time growing up in my grandparents' farm in Bihar, in India, which is one of the northernmost states. It's one of the poorest states in India. And back then, actually, I hated everything to do with agriculture. The rest of the year I was living in a city, except in the summer and winter vacation, as it happens in India. My parents would drop us all, brothers and sisters, with our grandparents, and they would disappear for the vacation. And these villages, they did not have any electricity. They did not have toilets. And, I wasn't really looking forward to it. But the thing that stuck to my mind when I was there going to those villages is the extreme poverty that was there. A lot of kids that I grew up with, it was, my mom would keep the offerings after a prayer outside, and there was a swarm of kids just going to grab something to eat. And so that's been at the back of my mind in everything I do. The thing that drives me is, can I develop tech that gets to those poor people, the kids I grew up with, the friends who taught me how to ride a bike? Can I get the technologies to them? So with agriculture and food, I had to learn that. That was another thing where it was all about learning something new. Of course, I've been working in it for over 10 years, 11 years now. I don't consider myself an expert, but the thing that helped me there, the trick that helped me was working with the experts. So I'd work a lot with all the land-grant universities across the US, in India. We've done a bunch of stuff there. In fact, our CEO just highlighted some of our work earlier this year of how in a remote drought-prone region, we actually have over 10,000 farmers using this technology, some of the things we built. And now the latest thing I'll add is around AI. AI is just changing. It's not just about the tech, it's about the culture around how culture in a company, in an organization, it's about how we work. People can try to learn AI as a tool, but the bigger thing to do would be to learn it as changing your habit with AI. And that's something that requires going beyond just looking at it as, hey, how do I use it as a tool, as to how do I change myself, looking inwards and trying to adapt and change. But at a high level, all of these things, all the things you talked about business models, these tech, the geopolitical aspects, all of them come together. The geopolitical aspects, a lot of it is related even to, even with who do you work with, what's happening where. There are a lot of models being developed around the world with AI models. There's things happening in China, in Europe, in different places. How do you use when, where, for what? All those things become very important.
Thank you, Ranveer. So much that you shared in your response. I really love the personal reflection that you brought into the conversation and how that's really informed your journey. And we see with Microsoft, one of the top companies in the world at the helm of AI development, the impact that it's having. Thank you. Next, we'll turn to you, Patricia. Again, macro forces, even micro, that you're observing, experiencing within your world of work that is really requiring learning agility more than ever.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I would add two things to the things that you talked about. One is the aspect of people. So with all the different generations in the workplace right now, I think this is the time in the world in which we have the most numbers of generations in the workplace at the same time. And each generation has very different characteristics, not to generalize, but different needs, different ways that people are comfortable interacting, and different ways to express their values and their talents. And I think that having the ability to learn how to work with people in different situations. Companies are more and more globalized, so we need to understand how to work and respect with other cultures and find a common ground. And so I think that that's one of the elements that can make projects and business very challenging, but can also make it very rewarding. Then I think that overall, the speed that technology is changing, in particular, the speed with which geopolitical things are changing and tariffs and this and there, like the speed is an element to consider in this whole aspect of how to learn and how to think about learning and how to apply. For us in our industry, masters in industrial gases, so it's oxygen and to hospitals and hydrogen for fueling more sustainably, fleets and things like that. And there are all sorts of new technological applications that can make other industries more effective or sustainable. And that is changing as we evolve. So like all these different aspects that are technological, people, speed, I think that those are things that are really important. I think I was very lucky that very early in my career, I figured out that the people part was really important, and I let that drive some of my choices. So I started in construction and I moved to consulting and then technology. And so in consulting, a lot of it was every couple of months, you needed to learn a new industry and you needed to learn to speak with different people that had different priorities and different ways to communicate. And so bringing it all together really has helped me early in my career. I'm very grateful for that because now it's kind of like second skin to do that, second nature.
Thank you, Patricia. It's really great to see how your experiences have lend itself to having this universal perspective. I think you also echoed a bit of what Ranveer said and just the point around globalization. He mentioned globalization of AI and then speed. It feels like we're on a roller coaster these days. Mike, what are your thoughts? What are some of the macro forces that you are encountering in your field of work that are requiring greater learning agility?
Well, so I first would have to say that I certainly can relate to, I think, what everything we've said here so far. But for me, it in the technology space as a computer scientist myself, it's the rate and pace, the half-life of technology. But the one thing I continue to recognize is that it's not changing, not only changing fast, but it's non-linear step change. It's actually changing fundamentally and causing us to, I think you may have mentioned it in the introduction, it's causing us to have to unlearn what we already know, right? And this is something that's often very hard for somebody that's senior and experienced, right? I know I've gone through some of this myself in my own career. I think you'd mentioned that I spent a lot of my career in IBM building core technologies, building systems, and I've made a fairly significant transformation in my career to applying technology to solve interesting problems in the world, similar to what Ranveer had described in his journey. And in doing so, one of the things that I found is that this unlearning what you already know, or unlearning maybe what you invented, right? And kind of in some cases having to decide what you had put your passion into there's a better way to do this. There's a different way to do this that needs the ability to step back and really understand that this unlearning is just as important as the relearning, kind of the new approach and skill. The other thing I wanted to actually, one of the things that resonated, Patricia, that you mentioned is actually the different generations, right? And I know one of the things that I also have found is the different generations all learn differently, and actually, if you can embrace that, right? I know I've been in this business for quite some time, and could probably be the grumpy old man in the room. I embrace actually all generations, and in fact, I very, very much embrace the youngest generation entering the workforce. In fact, one of the programs that I participated in and found it to be quite valuable is a reverse mentoring scenario where I had a mentor as a very senior technical executive. I had a mentor that was only 6 months into the industry, into the business, and it was a fascinating opportunity to learn different ways to learn. And you can take advantage of these generations, and part of it is being open and listening and understanding and appreciating these different ways and approaches and techniques for learning. So I just one of the things that I think in my industry and all of our industries, in just living in this world in general, right, being a continuous learner is a habit that everyone should form.
Thank you, Mike. Really, really appreciate that perspective, and bravo in the role reversal, so to speak, of being mentored by someone more junior to you. Something you said that really struck a chord is, well, we're talking about learning agility and we're talking about the change, but my God, having to literally unlearn something that is your baby, that you invented, that that you could be presumably quite attached to, that's the level of learning and unlearning or agility that many of us are at this point with all that's going on.
No,
So now that,
completely agree. Jennifer, if I could just add one
yeah,
thing there,
please, please.
completely related to what Mike was saying there. And one of the things I tell my
Yeah.
team here is, because we have to pivot so often, I'm like, be passionate about the problem, not the solution.
Mm,
That is what you're trying to solve. That problem is still not solved. Yeah, you might have invented something, you might have to pivot it, but be passionate about that problem, which is still unsolved.
yeah,
And that I've found to be better than, because now everything is getting disrupted. Even with AI, as both Patricia and Mike said, the rate at which new techniques are being developed, the number of papers being written in AI, it's unprecedented. There's no way anyone in the world can read all the papers, the top papers, even the top papers, reading it end to end. It's just you don't have the time.
yeah,
But we still have to learn. So learning with and keeping track of everything that's happening.
yeah,
Because, and that's why I tell people, just because you learned AI 6 months back doesn't mean you're the expert now.
yeah.
It's just changing so fast. So I resonated with both those points that Mike and Patricia made.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ranveer, for offering that. Being passionate about the problem, basically putting our attention on the journey, and not the goal. And no doubt, when we do that, we learn so much more because the mind itself is more present. So we've spent a bit of time already talking about some of the forces at play, some of the dynamics there. Would love to shift our conversation and start looking at some examples of frameworks of best practices in your respective industries. So, Ranveer, back to you. Your teams bring together researchers, product managers, engineers to literally move ideas that are born in the lab to product. And so I'm really curious to hear from you. What are some of the frameworks and best practices you use to keep learning and those feedback loops in play across these diverse groups towards that goal?
Yeah. Jennifer, it's a learning experience for me too. Starting doing something like a startup in a big company, the team's about 100-ish people, slightly more, but it's all about, and different functions all working together. Now if people can relate to this, the four functions that sit in my team, one is product, people who are building product management. The second is engineers who are building the product. The third is science, who are building all the models and all of that. And the fourth is research. That is, I want to stay grounded on, what's true now won't be true. Like I want to make bets. Typically, the way people did build products was, the product management team will look at what exists in the market, use that to come up with a plan of what ships, and then everyone would go around and ship it. But the thing is, right now, that model won't work because then the best you can do is match competition. You'll always lag what others are doing. Here, if you want to lead, you need to invest in research. But then the challenge becomes if you're investing in research, the thing is not completely baked now. You're making a bet it'll get baked in 4 or 5 months, and then working on a product simultaneously, starting to make a bet on that to make sure that you land something. So it's a different world. I have been in this space for, as I said, at Microsoft for 20 years, shipped things in the old Windows way, where we would ship something every 3 years would be a new Windows release, to now coming at, every month there's something new that we are announcing. So that within the team, the way I try to get everyone to be on track, these are just some of the principles, and I'm here to learn too from all of us here. Some of the things, some of the best practices we do is, we do use Teams channels extensively. That is, it's more than emails. What I recommend is everyone to be on Teams. And what we have is a few of these channels are on learning, like, the latest science that's coming out, any new product that was announced, any new papers that were written. And these are things, this is one thing that we use very aggressively, and I am very active on it. So what this means is the teams are also active. They want to go and talk about what's happening. The second thing we do is across the team, we also have a reading group every week, an hour where we just go through what's happening. Everyone is educated on what's the latest. Even though their function might not require it, like, for example, a product manager who's coming with an MBA, they might not be deep in science, but I want them to attend as well to be just up to date about what's happening. So that helps as well. Some of the other things around learning that we are doing is, this is not directly learning, but something that reinforces learning is we have a kudos channel. In Teams, you have these different channels for the group. Kudos, where people are encouraged to go talk about, give kudos to others. And part of the things we give kudos for is for bringing in new tech, teaching someone something new. So the peer learning part of it, because as I said, the number of papers that are coming out, it's impossible for anyone to be on track of all of them. But this peer learning piece, where someone comes up, learns of something, and then tells others about what's happening, is also something that we appreciate.
Thank you, Ranveer. 3 really concrete approaches. You mentioned team channels, reading groups, and then kudos, those shout outs, so to speak. I love that you as the leader are also modeling, which creates that permissioning, if you will, for others to follow suit. And we all know one of the best ways to learn is by teaching. So thank you for that. Patricia, over to you. The question for you along the same lines is, I understand that culture or culture development has been such a huge component of your career, and many of us would agree that culture can be one of the hardest or more challenging systems to change. It's all about people, right? And so how do you build or integrate learning agility frameworks into corporate culture, especially against the backdrop of sustainability, which in of itself is always changing? Would love to hear your insights on that. What are some solutions, frameworks, approaches?
Yeah, I think I'd start there first, talking a little bit about sustainability for people that may not be familiar with it, because that will put into context to the other things I'll talk about. So in sustainability, you're basically dealing with environmental, with social, and with governance topics. So these are 3 very broad areas. And for each company and each customer, it may mean something very, very different. So for a company that may have a lot of packaging, sustainability and environment may be a lot about not having that much packaging and reducing that. For some, it may be circularity. For others, it may be more efficiency. For others, it may be reducing their carbon footprint. And that in and of itself, sorting through in each of these different pillars of sustainability, what's important and what do we need to learn to figure out what's important, right? So I think that the challenge starts there, that it's very cross-functional. It has elements of science, has elements of technology, has social elements, has human resources elements. It has all aspects of the business. I mean, talk about governance, right? Governance could be platforms to manage the company. It could be structures to fulfill, to approve, to ensure integrity. And so it's incredibly cross-functional and incredibly changing over time, particularly influenced by geopolitics, but also influenced by the different generations that are in the marketplace. So different generations buy products differently, and they value different attributes of the products. More and more new generations value sustainability attributes, particularly environmental beneficial aspects of a product. So when we start to think about culture, we really need to think about it systemically and learn about it systemically. Although technology can be very helpful and it helps us bridge the gaps between, time zones and cultures and things like that, ultimately, building structures in which people meet, speak, are able to develop the curiosity of being there together, are able to develop common goals that then they can cross the finish line together. Those are things that start to build culture, and being very clear about what are the values that are behind the things that we want to accomplish, what kind of company we want to be, really keeping some of the values of, like for Messer, it's things like entrepreneurship. It is being a responsible corporate citizen and participating not just from the point of view of profits, but also contributing to society in other ways, right? So bringing it back to the values and creating feedback loops that reinforce that, be it with rewards, be it with how we promote people, be it the conversations that we have, really, really important. But I would also say that having alignment with senior leadership, alignment with the people that are working, like with my team, we're constantly talking about what is the most important thing right now? What are the things that we really need to focus on? What's coming at us? And keeping those, connections with the different functions alive and real, and connecting with people one-on-one, and making sure that there is a relationship there in which people feel safe to disagree and say, I don't agree with this, and why? And so that's just the starting point of the conversation, not the ending point of the conversation, which I think is one of the problems sometimes. Perhaps this relates a little bit to what Mike was talking about in terms of unlearning, but unlearning in relationship to others. When people are so stuck in their point of view or in the solution or in the ways that it should be, then you can't move. The disagreement is the beginning of the conversation or the end of the conversation. To get to the solution, there are many more conversations to get there. And keeping that teamwork alive is really important for culture to thrive.
This is great. Thank you, Patricia. So a few suggestions that you would mention: the commonality of goals, alignment to those goals, clarity on values, feedback loops with regards to those values, and safe spaces. And that brings to mind, it's not just universal perspective, but that agility of perspective. And I loved how you said you're learning to take a bet. This reminded me of what Ranveer mentioned earlier with regards to research. You're learning and in a sense taking a bet on what product you want to move for. So some parallels there. Mike, similar question. We're looking at frameworks and principles. When it comes to your world as the chief architect of Kyndryl Bridge, you're leading this platform that connects learning, operations, insights, literally in real time. And so really, really curious to hear from you. What are some frameworks and approaches that you're utilizing for your teams to learn and adapt as the platform evolves?
Yeah. So it's really quite interesting. So we build a platform that learn and adapts very quickly, and we recognize we have to follow those practices in the way we build the platform itself, right? So it's we build the platform to deliver that kind of value. We need to practice that kind of value in the way we learn and adapt to the world and forces around us. So the platform itself is a technology platform that we're fortunate enough to have agile methodologies to follow. But one of the keys that I find is fully embracing these agile methodologies. So we follow a fairly well recognized model of quickly and incrementally and continuously learning and adapting and pivoting when necessary. So doing this and being able to do this at speed. But we fully embrace these, and the reason I kind of emphasize this fully embrace is that a lot of the customers that we serve in the large enterprise space that are coming from a very traditional IT infrastructure world often use these words, agile methodologies and DevOps and whatnot, but haven't fully embraced them. They've attempted to do a little bit over a lot of scope, right? And what I find and what we found to be successful with the platform we're building is you have to kind of go all in, right? And one of the things that this ability to fully embrace, which can be different for those that aren't used to it, and it takes a certain amount of trust, to kind of make that leap to go all in. But when you go all in is when you can see the value. So I know one of the things that I recommend to companies that we work with, that are maybe speaking talking the talk but not walking the walk, is you have to walk the walk and you have to walk it fully. And another concept that we kind of tie with it, we couple this again, that's another fairly well understood concept of learning fast and failing fast. And again, this is something that probably everyone has heard about, but is really hard to, again, fully embrace, right? People, humans in general, are not are adverse to failure. Corporations are overly negatively critical to failure, and actually attempting to fail fast but not actually fully embracing this and failing fast actually can end up in a worse situation. It can make a bad situation even worse by keeping projects and keeping initiatives kind of alive when they really should have been a lesson that we learned and embraced, and in a positive sense, and moved on, right? The reason I'm so passionate about this is that as a technologist, I don't really think you understand the boundaries of what the space you're working in if you haven't failed. You don't know where the limits are. You have to fail to know where those limits are, and you have to be able to quickly learn from those and adjust from those. So again, I really think it's this concept of fully embracing some of these concepts of agile methodologies, kind of going all in, taking the leap, and actually being willing to embrace some uncomfortable situations, some non-traditional situations, like this embracing failure and learning from failure as a way to really understand your bounds and your limits.
Thank you, Mike. Very cool to hear you guys are literally walking the talk. What you're offering as a service to your clients, you're literally doing internally as well, and some really great tips there. Embracing the method, going all in, having that passion, if you will, and then being willing to fail and take the risk. And this anecdote or example you gave really resonates. Sometimes letting go ends up becoming an admittance to failure, but if you're willing to be uncomfortable and move through that, there's so much more that you can learn on the other side of that. We'll shift the conversation and look at how does this all inform, well, our business growth and impact. Before we get into the next set of questions, I imagine our guests, participants who are here with us, from this conversation alone, already some questions are probably percolating. We are going to leave some time at the end for your questions. So just letting you know, if you happen to get ahead of us, that's okay. Go ahead and put the questions in the chat box. We're not ignoring you. We'll come back to them. So the next round of questions is really looking how can we connect learning agility, these frameworks, these approaches that you all spoke on, and translate that to business growth and impact. So Ranveer, back to you. Can you share a story or some metric where you saw a tangible result as a result of some of these approaches that you shared with us earlier?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm thinking at this point, Jennifer, which one to go after. There have been quite a few instances where, we pivoted, we did something new, and we saw an immediate bump. And, for us, metrics are mostly around adoption, right? If you look at business metrics, eventually it's revenue, but in the immediate things we look at are things like, wow, that's weekly active users, monthly active users, and things like that, which we track. We look at DSATs, that is, DSAT is satisfaction. How are people really seeing benefits from what we are doing? And some of the things I was talking about around learning and how the team basically was able to ship something faster as a result. One thing that happened very recently, this is as of last week, right? As I said, where often, our teams are, as I said, I'm in this learning phase too, because shipping an AI product at this speed within a large company, it's non-trivial. And especially, when people are coming in with a bias, if you have really strong engineers, really strong scientists, they all come with a bias of how they work, how they worked in the past. When you're bringing everyone in a team, things change. For example, I'll give you one example, which is, if you're a product manager, anyone who's here who's building products, a key function of a product manager is to write a PRD, a product requirements doc. Typically, a product manager defines the what is shipping as a product, and the engineers and scientists define the how. How do you ship it, right? The design. The thing is, the PRD captures the what. The typical way to build a product in AI, or in any, like, typical way any product is built in tech is you write the PRD, the product managers write the PRD, maintain the PRD. The PRD has everything around, what is the customer experience, how it's success, everything is there in the PRD. That's the source of truth, and everybody just follows it to build the product. Now, in an AI world where things are moving so fast, a PRD, making a complete PRD is really, really difficult. It's not what it used to be. In particular, in the AI world, suppose it's a Copilot product, right? So what it is, it's a chatbot. You're asking questions, you get responses, you ask it to do something, it'll go do something. A typical PRD doesn't capture everything that you need to ship a product. For example, one of the new things we've defined, so what the outcome of all of this last week was adding new sections in the PRD that needs to be written down. Like, for example, what is an acceptance criteria in a PRD? What this means is now we've augmented the product requirement doc to have things like a question and an answer that you would get right now, and an answer which is a good answer. And this is something, which typically data scientists would do. Now you're asking product managers who are not data scientists to do data science and write this section up. We said every product needs to have these 20 to 30 good responses for our design and science team to test against. Now, this is a process that you're changing. You're redefining a process and getting everybody to adapt quickly as a result. The good thing is it did change. This change was made a few months back. That's when we did it. It got to the point last week. The challenge was, the PRD needed to be altered again for a product that was going to ship. Now everyone else was like, we were building with respect to what you had spec'd at this point. Now things are changing. How do we do it? But this is where one of the changes we made is in the process was like, even though the product manager owns the PRD, the engineers and scientists are allowed to go make edits to the product requirement doc. So it's in a sense what we are also changing then is the responsibilities. Now we are no longer expecting the roles to be really well defined. Now an engineer is doing part of what a product manager does. A product manager is doing part of what a scientist would do. So you're seeing how these roles are interchanging. As a result, the business metric here is, we were able to land, I cannot name the exact number of customers, but, it's a 10x increase in the number of customers from what we had said we would deliver to what we are able to deliver by the end of this. So we go with semesters by the end of December. So this is because of this, and this is all about learning. People have been trained to be a certain thing, but in the future, we envision these roles to be more diffused. people, they'll have the main line of expertise, but people will have to learn to do other things as well and use AI to do it. I'm completely fine people leveraging AI as their assistant to get to that level of expertise. But we need that. We need that roles and responsibilities to be expanded from what it was and changed, not just expanded, it's changed.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ranveer. Very great example of seeing how different roles had to literally learn and be cross-functional for the sake of moving this product along. And instead of getting stuck on the previous process, in doing so, you actually got great results. So congrats to you and the team on that. Thank you so much for sharing this example. Along the same lines, Patricia, back to you. Would love to hear an example from yourself of a major operational or sustainability shift at Messer that required some learning, perhaps even unlearning some old ways of going about things. And how did you navigate that when learning can get stuck in a sense?
Example that is first an operational example and it still connects with culture, and then I'll relate that to sustainability as well. So a few years ago, as we became, Messer bought assets of a different company in the Americas, and it became a bigger company. And at the time, we relaunched our productivity program. Messer is both a manufacturing, a chemical, and a logistical company because of the nature of our products. We deliver them to customers within about 400 miles in many cases for our air separation units. And so it's a very diverse business in terms of different kinds of skills that you need. And continuous improvement is really important in that. Traditionally, the way people were accustomed to deliver on continuous improvement results was by having people have personal targets, and those targets being connected to their bonuses. And that kind of culture is okay. But as you can imagine, in a world that is always changing, there are many goals, many different priorities, many different things that we need to do. So you can't possibly put a goal on every single thing you need to deliver. And so we thought that, instead of actually having a target for productivity, we should actually have an aspiration. And at first, this was very uncomfortable for a lot of people. So like, nobody's going to do it. How is it that people are going to focus on this if that's not directly connected to how much they're paid from a bonus perspective? And I don't know, but very early on, I have confidence that what was motivating people was not necessarily just, the paycheck, but that they actually took pride in improving the business. And we kept bringing that up and then teaching people how to look at which point they could intervene such that they could make a difference. Now, we're not talking just about executives here. We're talking about all different levels, from the floor, from the manufacturing, all the way to people that do R&D, all the way to people that do sales, and to really develop a common culture in which we take pride in continuously learn and continuously improve, and with that develop, deliver on productivity goals. Fast forward to today, given that sustainability is an ever-evolving topic and that requires alignment both with our shareholders to understand, what are their interests and what areas do they want to play and deliver on, as well as with financial markets to understand what's of value to them, what's of value to customers, and so on and so forth. So there are many fluid areas that are continuously evolving, and you really need to pay attention how they're evolving. So it's kind of like your target may be moving as it goes. So alignment is constantly there. But the same principle was applied, which is, no, we're not going to have targets right away. We need to work with people to continuously improve their plans to deliver on certain goals, like, for instance, decarbonization, and work with people to take pride and take an interest and do what's right for the business, which may maneuver, it may change from time to time. So it's a little bit more soft skills, a little bit more from a culture perspective. But building a culture that takes pride in continuous improvement, that takes pride in making a difference, in being entrepreneurial and agile, and using that to change the systems, to change the ways people think, and to teach people how to think differently. Does that make sense?
Makes great sense. Really great to hear how culture can influence outcome and pivoting from the goals itself to the aspirational aspect. It's great to hear that it's made a difference for Messer. Thank you for sharing that example with us. There's some parallels as well. To I think what Ranveer mentioned earlier about less focus on the goals and more on the process here, process being that those values, that aspiration. Over to you, Mike. Again, looking at how this is, the process of learning is tethered to outcomes. More specifically, with regards to Kyndryl emerging from IBM to in a sense, reinvent itself, what are some learnings from that process, whether technical or cultural, that has led to the success of Kyndryl?
Yeah. Probably one of the biggest learnings or lessons with respect to the Kyndryl spin out and transformation was really all about the culture and core values. Um, so when we spun off from IBM, we had been a product centric company, a product centric mindset. We built products and technologies as our core and key mission. As we spun out of IBM and formed Kyndryl, we became a people-centric company that really put people and their learning at kind of the core of our culture. Um, and so as a people-centric business, our people's knowledge and their experience are kind of in many cases recognized as our single biggest asset. I also, and one of the things I want to reflect on, and one of the things that's important to me is also this emphasis on knowledge and experience, and they're very much related, but they're different, right? And I know sometimes people have a hard time, knowledge, experience, yeah, it's all skills, it's all learning. I often kind of tell a silly story of my neighbor, right? So my neighbor, I'll refer to him as Bob to protect the innocent. Bob, it was a great guy, well educated, very successful lawyer. Um, he actually decided at some point in his life that he wanted to ride a motorcycle. So, as a well educated individual, he went out and he bought many books on the subject. He studied and he learned about how motorcycles worked and the models of motorcycles and how to drive them, and he then made the leap and bought a brand new bike that was delivered to his home right here in my neighborhood. Excited to get on and take a spin, he confidently jumped on, drove it down his driveway, and put it in the ditch. And and he knew exactly why that happened, and he understood that from the knowledge he had. He had all the knowledge he needed, but he had no experience. And I think that while this is kind of a silly story, it does help point out the fact that as we look at Kyndryl's core asset, our people and their knowledge and experience, we value both knowledge and experience, right? And so as we look at people and their needs, we recognize some people have a lot of knowledge, right? They have great degrees, they have many certifications, well-recognized certifications, but what they need help with developing experience. And so building both the knowledge muscle and the experience muscle go kind of hand in hand and become quite important, and became critically important as we spun out from IBM.
Thank you, Mike. Love that. Love that story. It's such a tangible example of the critical role that experience plays, and knowledge and ideas being the biggest asset. In TLEX, we often talk about the mind being being the most important asset. Really love hearing how shifting from a product centric to people centric actually enabled Kyndryl to better thrive and succeed. we are almost out of time. Our time together has actually gone by quite quickly. Um, as much as I would love to jump into Q&A, there is one last question that I would love to hear from each of you briefly, and it's more um, personal in tone, and that is if you could each briefly, very briefly share what is it that you do on a personal level, on an individual level, to keep that learning muscle engaged. We have the approaches at the office with the teams, but on a personal level, what are some best practices that you can share with us all here? Well, Ranveer, come back to you if you could share briefly. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so at the end of the day, every day I ask my daughter, what did you learn today? And, because the main thing I tell her is it's not about the grades, it's about, it's about learning. What new thing did you learn today? She's a teenager, and she asks me back, Dad, what did you learn today? And that gets me to think. And the days I'm not that happy, she knows that I just spent it in meetings. It was less about new learning and more about just talking. So yeah, so this is what keeps my learning alive, is every day I have to give an answer. So that keeps me driven as to what's the exciting thing I learned that day.
Thank you. That's a great motto that we can all gauge our progress with. Patricia, over to you.
I think that the main thing I do every day that empties my cup so that I can unlearn and learn again is meditation. That brings me back to sort of like a calm mind, a meditative state, a space in which I can hear people, be more curious and be more effective in what I do. But as well as in terms of setting the boundaries in terms of what we want to do and what we need to say no, because I think that a lot of the challenges and the stress that comes in the workplace is having that ability to see what's important and say yes or no to it. Yeah, meditation has been a game changer.
That's great. It's great to hear how meditation has allowed you to add that layer of discernment. What's the information or those moments that matter versus what is extra noise, creating space for that learning. And
And the
Mike,
empathy and
and
the empathy
empathy and
the
empathy.
empathy for myself when I'm in trouble or have difficulties
Yeah.
is, let's face it, learning sometimes can be hard, and for other people.
Most definitely. And Mike, from your end.
Yeah, so I actually just wanted to connect and comment on what both Renvir and Patricia said. So I try to make a moment every day, right, to just stop everything that's happening. I wouldn't I, I I wouldn't call it as a full meditation, although I would love to make it so. But it's just to stop and pause and to think of what did I learn today, right? And so whether you're asking yourself or you're asking, a family member, a child. But the other thing that I try to do is I try to make as many interactions as I have throughout the day a learning lesson, right? As small as it may be, right? So if I'm going to enter into a situation that could just become yet another meeting or yet another, I try to find a way to make it a learning lesson, even if it's just a small nugget.
That's great, Mike. Every moment can be a learning for us, and being able to be open to that and recognize it as it's happening. And this question, I think it's the best way we can end our conversation today is, what did you learn today? Sincerely hope that our participants today learned a lot from this conversation. I certainly have, and we do have some questions, but unfortunately we are at time. They're very, very good questions. A lot of them around, two of them around AI, and then one just around learning styles of the different generations. Perhaps we can repurpose these questions into later conversations via LinkedIn. That's where you can find us all. With that, we'll close today's session, and a big thank you to each of our panelists. Thank you so much, Mike, Ranveer, Patricia. Your sharing, your experience, your insights has, I believe, given everyone greater tools, perspectives to walk away with and apply personally, not just personally, but also within their teams, their organizations. Everyone, we wish you the best, and thank you so much for being here with us with TLEX's Centered CxO, Agile Learning for Growth and Impact. We'll be hosting more of these sessions, and we hope to see you all again soon.